Okay, while he's trying to feed that, can anyone in the house, what do we know is menopause? I really like this session to be quite interactive session, where people can ask their questions. So I would like to talk little and give opportunity for people to ask questions, so I can answer those questions. That's what I'm really looking forward to. I think I will just talk about some basic things. And then I had a couple of scenarios that I would like us to discuss, and through those scenarios I was hoping to bring up some issues that I'd like us to talk about today. Okay, well, so that's me really. Yeah, so can anyone, any ideas what is menopause? Sorry? Yes, so some people, menopause equates hot flushes. Yeah, the end of fertility. Correct. Yeah, someone said sad. Putting men on pause. Well, I would hope that after our discussion today, you'd be able to unpause the men. Any other thing? Yeah, your body stops producing estrogen. Yes. So I think we have lots of things that we've talked about there. Yes, they're all correct. So yeah, menopause, someone said the end of the fertility period, when your estrogen levels go down. So the fertility period starts from about the time when we attain puberty, which these days is happening quite earlier. We're getting children that are 9 years old, starting their periods, but usually happens in the early teens. From then, the reproductive cycle really has started. There's lots of eggs in the ovaries. They're producing the estrogens. They're the things that make us feel, like a woman. They're the reason why you get the periods that you get every month. But as time goes on, those estrogen reserves starts to drop, and the way it happens is different for individuals. For some people it happens so quickly, some others it happens a bit later. It's that effect of having less estrogen in circulation that creates all of the symptoms that we experience during menopause. I want to talk about when. So there's no specific time where you would say, oh, menopause will start at this time. But generally we tend to see that most people will start to move towards menopause from about the age of 45, but it can happen earlier. If it's happening from about the age of 45, that would be seen as normal. But if you're attaining menopause about 30s, that's abnormal and needs to be dealt with in a different way. But from about 45, it's not unusual. It's not unusual, and so that's what we should expect. But we now say that you have attained menopause because it's a continuum. When you have not had periods for consecutive 12-month period. The sad thing is that sometimes you start counting. 1, you're happy. Oh yeah, you're getting towards menopause, and you get to month 10. And then you get another period. So then you go back to the beginning and start counting again. And it's only when you've had consecutive 12 months of no periods that you say you have attained menopause. And that, like I said, can happen at any time. Yeah, so the big symptoms, that's what some people, would equate menopause with. I've put the first one, the vasomotor symptoms. Those ones are really associated with the level of estrogens in the body. That's the one that everyone talks about. It's the hot flushes, it's the feeling hot, feeling cold. I'm hot now. And then you take off your clothes and then, oh, I'm cold now. We all know about this thing. Some people don't know about this thing on this table. I was having a chat with some ladies, and then we thought, maybe we need to have a seminar meeting at the men's breakfast. And, just have a talk, about menopause. So when you're opening the windows, closing the windows, putting the covers on, taking the covers off, they kind of understand you're normal. It's okay. So the hot flushes, the night sweats, the ones that keep you awake at night, so even though you've been sleeping for 10 hours, you're exhausted because you've just been really awake through the nights. Then the more hidden symptoms are the psychological symptoms, where sometimes people aren't even aware that they're going through the menopause. They just think, oh, I'm depressed, I'm feeling low. Sometimes someone who's never had anxiety suddenly starts to have episodes of anxiety. You've been coping with your work for the last 25 years, and now you're just scared to go into work. You're anxious. What's happening to you? My hand's shaking now as I'm holding that. Some women are more irritable. And your children are like, Mom, what's wrong? You know, you want to cut off everyone's neck. They say so, you want to bite them off. Menopause, something is happening. And you think to yourself, this is not me, it's not me. Or is it the memory lapses? You just can't remember. You've got to do, what did I come to do? You can't remember. Or, something at your office, the process that you have done every day, suddenly you're just not coping. Something is wrong. Some women would describe it as a brain fog. There's just this cloud in their heads, and they just can't think straight. Poor sleep. These are, and I think in my experience, I think the psychological symptoms are maybe the worst symptoms, for women. For the hot flushes, because you could just deal with it, maybe, sometimes without being crazy. You're just fanning, and then you're just wondering, what's wrong with this woman? Fanning herself in winter. You can, but what do you do with your mood that just suddenly drops, or with anxiety, or with those memory lapses? Vaginal dryness is another problem. There's been no problem, you didn't have to think about it, but suddenly things are just dry down there. There's problems with intercourse. Some people start to have recurrent urinary tract infections, and we don't realize that it's because of the vaginal dryness that we're getting that. And of course, the reduced libido, which has always been a problem anyway. But then, menopause just makes it worse. Then we have the headaches, palpitations, and then the aches and pains, and then you wake up in the morning. I'm telling my story. And then it takes you like 10 minutes, and you're now fine. What's wrong? And then the period problems. There are people who have never had problems with their periods. Everything has been fine. You suddenly get to 45. You start having heavy periods. You start having painful periods. It's here and there. These can also be problems as we're approaching the menopause. Okay. So when patients come to see me about menopause, what I try to tell them is, it's normal. Try to normalize what's happening to you. It's a physiological process. If you had a daughter who was 16 and hadn't had their period, you'd be taking them to the doctor, there's something wrong. It's normal for them to have had a period maybe earlier. So if they're having that period at that time when they should, you're not going to be worried. You won't take your daughter and say, oh, yeah, she's 14. She went out and she's bleeding. And then the doctor will say, yeah, she's having a period. That's menstruation. And that's the same thing with menopause. It's a physiological process. So we need to, first of all, have that, at the back of our minds. Well, today we're talking about menopause, trying to help people who might have problems with the symptoms, but at the same time, still trying to say menopause is a normal thing that might happen, and some other people might not have any problems with it. There are lots of women who would probably go through their menopause who might, be able to just sail through all of those symptoms that we talked about. But for some others, it's more difficult. What we want is for the people who are struggling, who are having that difficulty, to know that there's help, out there, and that you don't just need to suffer needlessly. So the main management styles would be going through lifestyle modification, just looking at things in our lives that generally would help us feel better, maybe exercising more, choosing lighter clothing, you know, so that you're not feeling hot. So people might think, oh, she dressed like that at this time. But you're trying to modify your lifestyle to fit what's happening to you at that point in time. Yeah, we talk about exercise, maybe not smoking, not drinking excessive, you know, the usual lifestyle things. Weight loss if you're overweight. Yeah, and just maintaining as healthy a lifestyle as possible. Those would be the initial things that you'd want to do. But certainly, if you've done those things and there's still a problem, then you can reach out, you know, to healthcare professionals who will be able to help. And the mainstay of treatment for menopause is HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. So the reason that we're feeling the way we're feeling is because the estrogen levels have dropped. So we now have to replace the estrogen to help us feel better. That's the way to manage. And it can be either continuously replacing or replacing sequentially. This would depend on if you have stopped having periods completely, then you can have it continuously, and it will be sequential replacement. If you're still having periods, we'll have to do it, you know, sequentially. We talk about alternatives to HRT, but these alternatives, I think they really should be offered for someone who, for some reason, is not able to have HRT. It shouldn't be the first thing, you know, that we would be recommending, you know, for HRT, for menopause. Before a lady would come to see the doctor, they would have probably visited Holland and Barrett. I don't have any shares in Holland and Barrett, but I always tell people to go to Holland and Barrett. People would have done, you know, lots of self-help things, you know, maybe black cohosh, evening primrose, you know, different things that women would use. They're just multivitamins, herb-related things, so they don't cause any harm. So by the time you come to the GP, it's about now discussing other things, you know, that you can have. And I think that if it's safe for you to have HRT, your GP should discuss HRT with you and only really discuss the alternatives if there's a reason why you can't have that. And sometimes the reason can just be personal preferences, you know, of not wanting to have HRT. Yeah, I don't know, I just thought I should mention that. There was that study, the Million Women study, was the largest study that was in the 90s. I think it was published in the early 2000s. And that's what really changed the face of HRT treatment in the United Kingdom. I think in the whole world, they came up with the risk that there was such a high risk for breast cancer with HRT from that study. And then everyone got scared to have HRT, everyone got scared to prescribe HRT, and that had been the case for several years. But more recently, there have been other research that have been done saying that no, that risk was not as high as that. They were looking at women who were already a lot older, and so they had a higher risk of breast cancer. They had other lifestyle issues, like maybe they were smoking, they were overweight, you know, those were other confounders that was affecting that risk. So now the thought is that the risk for breast cancer is not as much as we have thought. And so in the last few years, I'm sure people would have watched the program Mirena Coil on telly. When they do those programs, the next day everyone starts coming to the surgery. But yeah, so that's what we want, you know, to educate people that, you know, HRT is not as bad as we thought in the past. Yeah, so here I just wanted to talk about the different preparations. It could be oral tablets, patches, gels, sprays. It could be your Mirena Coil for the people who have Mirena Coils for contraception. You could use that as well for your HRT. And the vaginal estrogens, people tend to forget that that's HRT as well. That always helps with the vaginal dryness. Yeah, so, and the type of preparation that you would be offered would be from an assessment of your risk. So when you've had that discussion, then your GP would be able to say, oh, I think this is the best one that might be for you. You still want to allow your patients to have choice, but then when you are able to give them information to base their choice on, then that's a better way of offering choice. Can you see that? Should I read it? Yes. Okay. So I thought I would use this scenario. This is the place where Bruna. 10:30. Yeah, okay. I don't know how much time we had. So instead of just going again through the symptoms, I would just read the scenario and then just allow for open discussion, about the symptoms. So I hope there's nobody called Elena here today. So my first patient is Elena. She's a 45-year-old school teacher. Her periods have always been regular, but in the last 2 years, they have become rather heavy and infrequent. She struggles during her working day, breaking into sweats, which can be embarrassing. She works with teenagers, but seems to have a very short temper at school and at home with her teenage children. She has reduced sex drive and experiences some dryness down below. Her sleep is interrupted, usually waking up about 3 a.m., feeling hot, only to feel cold after a few minutes of having her covers off. She wakes up tired because she spends a significant amount of the night taking covers on and off, on and off. Her mother attained menopause early, by the age of 46. Elena is of African descent. So I just want us to, can we just have a discussion, about that? What do you think? What do you think, that are the issues that are being raised here? The issues that are being raised here, I want you to think about age of menopause. I want you to think about, the particular symptoms that Elena is having. I want you to think of how it's affecting Elena. I want you to think of maybe Elena's relationship with her husband because of some of these symptoms that she's experiencing. Just her general well-being. Then I want you to think of Elena being African. What are the things that is coming to your mind?
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
It's only after the point that she is of African origin. Because when I was going through my menopause, and I went to see...
I think I should give you the mic.
Okay. When I was going through my menopause, can you hear me? Okay.
I went to my doctor and I said I'm having palpitations. I used to have terrible palpitations. And he said, I said, but I don't have hot sweats or anything. And he said, people from Asian origin have different symptoms. So I was just going to clarify, has ethnicity and race got to do anything with your menopausal symptoms?
I don't think so.
Can I just add, he was a man, the doctor.
Well, so your ethnicity does not affect how menopause presents because it's estrogen and there's no African estrogen, European estrogen, Asian estrogen, no. But what can happen is that how we respond, that's what differs. And as I wrote that, I thought I do see quite a lot of patients, with menopause. One, because they don't want to see the men, they come to see the women in the practice. And then because I have the special interest with women, so I see a lot of them. But as I was writing this, I just thought, I've never seen a black woman come to speak to me about menopause. No. Are they not having menopausal symptoms? They do. Yeah. So I think that's the only thing that differs. The health-seeking behavior for certain things. Health-seeking behavior for certain things. So I hope that will change from this discussion. If you need help, get help.
Sorry, I just had a question. What would you consider a good number of hours for a good sleep? repairing your recalibrating? Because it's true that I tend to wake up early, and I've always thought, oh, because I'm an early person, but sometimes I'm thinking I can do it with a bit of sleep. So
how many hours do you sleep?
Well, if I'm lucky, about 5 hours.
Well, I think 5 hours might be a bit short, and I don't think anyone would say, there's a certain amount of sleep that is recommended. But I think most people would say between 6 to 8 hours might be, what would be considered. If you are having any of the Fitbits and, all of these watches, they'll be telling you, it tells you about the quality of your sleep. You need at least 6 hours, I would think.
Do you get a lot of cases where the symptoms and the side effects, the negative side effects, are so severe to manage?
I'm not kind of clear.
So the negative, the impacts that you mentioned, so do you get the cases, are they high, whereby people get to the point that they are not able to manage with the symptoms?
Thank you. Yes, we do. It's menopause that makes a woman that all her life she's been getting everything together. She suddenly just looks as if she's gone crazy. So we do get quite a few cases like that. Not everyone is at that extreme, but the idea is that you don't really want to get to that extreme. A stitch in time always saves 9. Knowing that this is what's happening to me, this is what I need to do, that's what you want to do before you get to the point where you actually have a breakdown. People have had breakdowns, having problems, and it's just as easy as having HRT.
Thank you. I can identify with, is it Elena, in some ways, because I'm also a teacher. And I went through a period of having very heavy periods. And that whole embarrassment, there was once when I was sitting down and I actually wet the chair. And I had to email one of my colleagues to say, this is what's happened, can you come and help me? So it's a very lonely place to be, because who do you talk to about that sort of thing? And I mean, now in school there's a charity that gives sanitary products to girls. So we pack them up and give them to the girls for free. And we've actually started thinking of putting them in the women's toilets at work as well, because we have had some teachers come and say, oh, I had an accident, can I borrow some? I know it's for the girls, but can I have some anyway? So it's that sort of support. And that day it happened to me, I actually had to go home, get showered and changed to go back to work. Yeah, and I couldn't talk to anyone to say, I'm really embarrassed, can I maybe just stay at home and not come back to work? They would probably think, why should I make such a big deal of it? But that's something I had to deal with for quite a long time. And the other effect was that it made me very anemic and very sick as well. And no one, seemed concerned about the fact that I was actually struggling with it. It was something that I was just supposed to get on with because it happens to women. So I think we need to raise an awareness about that.
Yes, so if we keep on having heavy periods, I always tell women, you've got 6 liters of blood, 5.6. If you're just flooding and flooding, it's a matter of time, you would become anemic. So it's about doing something about it. Your GP can help you, and they would recommend things like the Mirena Coil, in the first instance, maybe other forms of contraception, if you're not happy to have Mirena Coil. And that's why it's really useful for women who are needing HRT, because they can also use their Mirena Coil as the progesterone component of their HRT. So there's help out there for you, if you're having heavy periods. Sometimes it might not be just a physiological problem like you have, at menopause. That's another reason why you need to seek help, because if you're having heavy bleeds, especially about 48, 50, then you want to check that everything is okay first, before you get some advice on what needs to be done. So if we have a problem, please, seek help. So that was a useful, very helpful point. Yes?
Can you please shed more light on, you talked about the various symptoms, and obviously people have different types of symptoms. is there, can the symptoms come in combinations, or is it a case of if you have one of all those symptoms and you're at kind of that age, then you go and see your GP? What would you advise?
Yeah, thank you very much, Doctor. Yeah, you can have any one of the symptoms at all. And the question I usually get asked is, you have a 55-year-old woman who's still having periods, lucky, still having periods at 55, and then she comes and says, oh, doctor, can I have some blood test? I want to check if I'm menopausal. And I say, I know you are menopausal. We don't need to do any blood tests. So when you're about a certain age, you don't need any kind of investigation, and that's why we just use that figure 45. But then if someone is 44, what's the difference between 44 and 45? So if you're 44 and you're getting any of those symptoms, then yes, we can start to think, about menopause. But certainly your GP might be wanting to offer blood tests if you're a lot lower. So maybe if you're 42, 43, 44, I'm quite happy to offer you, blood tests to confirm that you're menopausal. But if you're 45, I most likely wouldn't. I would just say, yes, I agree with you, you're menopausal. And you can have any of those symptoms. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes you get people who don't get hot flushes or night sweats, and they have all the other symptoms. So it's not necessary that you need to, have certain from every group. As long as you're in the age group where you can be menopausal and you're experiencing any one of those symptoms, then you should be considered as having menopausal symptoms and getting the treatment that you require. I'm doing my exercise.
No, thanks for sharing, and it's good that we have some of the young kids here as well, because I think for me, when you're going through the menopause, especially when you've got kids, because I had my teenage boys when I was going through it, and they said, Mom, what's wrong with you? You're the calm one. Are you mad? What's going on? So I didn't know what was going on, but when somebody explained what was going on, I was able to sit my boys down and say to them, you know what, this is what's going on. This is what I'm thinking. Because sometimes my son is like, Mom, what are you doing? You hot, it's winter, like what you were saying. I had to laugh. So I really think it's important as women that we basically explain to our children, especially, because sometimes they think there's something wrong, and if you've got a partner as well, for them to understand what you're going through. So now I really appreciate when they used to say, my mom is really strong-headed, I'm like, oh my God, this is what she was going through. But I didn't know about it, so thank you very much for that.
So we just added another list of the places we need to go. We need to go to youth.
What is the time span for having menopause? Because I'm in my late 50s and I'm still having intermittent periods with no symptoms. And I was now curious. I didn't realize you got it at 45. I thought it was a bit older, into your 50s.
So that age 45, thank you very much. That age 45 is around when we expect that you start to get the symptoms. But most people would attain menopause at about 50, plus or minus 2, 52. Up to that age is when they would have gone through the 12 months without, but that's most people. All right? You still get the person who is 56 and they're still having periods. Yeah. But what you want to be sure of is that if you have gone through that entire 12 months of not having periods, if you now have a period, you need to speak to your doctor, because that would be considered post-menopausal bleeding, which can be from serious causes. But if you haven't ever stopped for full 12 months, carry on. Just keep having the bleed. Yeah. But you're lucky, no symptoms.
I had a hysterectomy when I was about 39, and then my doctor put me on tablets, and then I'm on so many different tablets for different things, so I asked him, can I go off of them? And he said no, and I said, how long have I got to be on them for? And he said, at least about another 10, 15 years. And I thought, why? Why have I got to be on them that long? Because they're not doing me, I thought, any good with all my other tablets. But why would he know I've got to be on that long for?
David, close your ears.
How old are you?
I'm 49.
All right. So with menopause, sometimes some women... Oh, you can unblock it now. Sometimes some women get put into menopause earlier for different reasons. You know, so you have a hysterectomy, you have your ovaries taken out at 39. That means that you have now been rendered menopausal at 39. But then you were supposed to really still have your estrogen all the way to age 50. That can be risky in that you start to experience the symptoms quite earlier, which is not the big problem, but there are other problems like the risk, the cardiovascular risk for you of having strokes, having heart attacks, the risk of having osteoporosis. So if you put someone in menopause before they should really have menopause physiologically, you should offer them HRT. So that's why they offered you HRT up to the age of 50. Then now he's telling you for another 10 years you should have, because that's now when most women would need HRT. But I still think that there's your choice there. You know, at this point, when you now get to that age of 50, there's your choice, because it's not every woman who has HRT. You could decide not to, but you might be going back to him 2 months after to say, can I have the HRT? When you start feeling hot.
So in terms of the term perimenopausal, what is that exactly, perimenopausal?
Yeah, so the term perimenopausal means around menopause. So that's what starts to happen from around 45. You know, that's the time where you're not menopausal, but then you start to get the menopausal symptoms. You know, so it's around menopause. And that period can vary for different people. Yeah. Let me...
One of the symptoms that really affected me more than any of these was frequent urination. It's one that doesn't come up very much, and I wondered if it is something that you hear about a lot, and it's that, not just the night sweats, but having to get up 7, 8 times in the night to pee, doing the school run and not quite getting into the school and thinking I'm not going to get back again, and working out constantly. And when I started HRT, it was the best thing ever. It suddenly gave me a sense of freedom. I could sleep through the night and I could get the school run done. It was the most amazing thing. I didn't have to stop twice. It's only 45 minutes. But still, I just wanted to bring that up. So, is that something
that... Yeah, so that's not a common symptom, you know, like you said, but I don't think that we can have an exhaustive list of the symptoms, you know, that people would get, you know, due to menopause. These are kind of like the common ones. And if for you, having had HRT, took that away, then that meant, you know, it was related, you know, to menopause for you. Ordinarily, I would have thought, yeah, most women start to have problems with their bladder about the same time. When you're having menopause, you know, we're having all this overactive bladder, we're having stress incontinence, you know, all of these things happen about that side. So there's a blur, whether, you know, this is related to menopause or this is age-related. But then if it improved, you know, with you having HRT, then that's good. But one can also think that it's probably with the improvement in the health of, you know, down below, all the ligaments, everything being a lot stronger. You know, with your HRT, that your symptoms would improve.
I was wondering, as younger, can we prepare for it, like with dietary changes? I've heard that some plants like have the plant estrogen, like soya beans and similar. If we consume them, can that help to prevent serious symptoms?
I'm not sure, you know, about preventing, you know, symptoms using those. But certainly those are the kind of things that one would advocate in that time where you're looking at lifestyle. You know, those are the type of things you want to start eating to see whether it would improve your symptoms. It does help some women. I've seen some women that that's all they needed to do with their menopausal symptoms, but it doesn't help, you know, with some others. So HRT is out there for people, you know, who can't just get through normal life, that the quality of their life is affected by the menopausal symptoms that they have. So yes, you could try that. Yeah, let's see how things pan out.
I just wondered if there's an upper age limit for HRT.
Sorry?
Is there an upper age limit for HRT to stop? Because I was on it for 5 years and then my GP said it's time to stop. It's a funding issue.
There is a slide, oh, you kind of paused there, I forgot I had slides. But there is a slide there that is talking about, you know, when the Million Women study came, everyone was scared. Nobody wanted to have HRT. Nobody wanted to prescribe HRT. But now things have changed. And then the new guidance is, well, it's always been that you want to have HRT, the lowest possible dose to control your symptoms for the shortest period that you need it. All right? They now talk about that the risk of breast cancer is not as much as we thought, and that the risk depends on what type of preparation you have and for how long you have it for. So maybe having a preparation. So let me just quickly go to that slide. I'll show you. Okay. So when you're having HRT from age 39 to age 50, there's no risk there's no additional risk. Because if your ovaries were still there, you would be getting the estrogen anyway. So there's no additional risk. All the additional risk comes from when you're having HRT after the age of 50. So now we're thinking that if a woman at the age of 50 to 59, they're taking HRT for an additional, for 5 years, that maybe there'll be one extra case of breast cancer. Then depending on the type of HRT that they've had, if they're having the continuous combined HRT, there might be 50 extra cases. You have that extra one from 50, so from 50 women having that continuous combined HRT, there'll be one extra, you know, breast cancer case. If you're having the combined cyclical ones, that's what you prescribe for the person who's still having periods, so they have to have cyclical, they're still bleeding, then you would need 70 women before you get one extra case. If you're having estrogen only, which will be the type of HRT you would have when you don't have your uterus anymore, that's considered probably the safest form of HRT, and you would need to have 200 women on that form of HRT before you would get an extra case of breast cancer. So I think that's what your GP was trying to say, but there's no limit to how long. I have patients in their 80s who are on HRT, and they're not going to part from it. They're not going to part with it. So you just have to keep on assessing your patient's risk and seeing whether it's suitable, you know, for them to continue. But there shouldn't be any time where you say you can't have HRT anymore. So the decision is yours. Oh, sorry, Babs.
I think we might have answered what you said.
My mum was 35 when she went through the menopause, and I was 37. My decision was to briefly take HRT and then I stopped it because I read all. So we're looking a number of years ago. So I'm now 59, so it's a long time ago. So I was probably in that catchment of what you said.
Yeah, where you should have had HRT till 50.
Yeah, I wasn't really advised, I didn't really understand. I have got osteoporosis, so does my mum. So it does make you wonder if there's an impact on not taking it, you know, generally. So I really don't know.
My mum's got it, so maybe I just thought it's hereditary, you know. But there wasn't. They say it's your choice, don't they? But if you're not advised, and I've just sort of, at that point there, maybe the education was so good as what it is now. So,
yeah, possibly. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why if someone is having menopause well under the age of 50, they need to be on HRT to avoid things like osteoporosis. Any more? Okay, so let's just go back. I think there was one more. Yeah, so this was to talk about risk assessment. So there we just talked about symptoms. How much time do we have, Bruna?
It's okay, I wanted to...
Okay, all right. Yeah, so this I thought we should... Alright, should I just, before I go on? Yeah, so we talked about family history. Yeah, so it's good to know. Some people might not know when their mom attained menopause because their mom had hysterectomy or something like that. But it's usually useful to know when your mom attained menopause. Then it gives an idea, because most likely you might be attaining menopause around that time as well. So that was something here she pointed out there. Osteoporosis, other benefits, preventing osteoporosis, the cardiovascular risk, but that's only up to the age of 60. We're not sure that you get any extra benefits after 60. Yeah, so this next scenario is to just help us to look at the risk and what your GP is probably looking at to help you decide whether that's the good choice, you know, for you to make. So here we're talking about Stephanie. I hope there's no Stephanie in the house. Okay, so Stephanie is a 50-year-old woman who would like to have HRT. She's having a discussion with her GP. Family history of breast cancer, womb, ovarian cancer, but more the breast cancer. The GP would want to know about history of clotting disorders, history of PE, pulmonary embolism, clot in the chest or clot in the legs, DVT. GP would want to know about the weight or the BMI, which we'll calculate using your weight and your height. They'd want to know your smoking status, exercise levels, alcohol. Okay, so I like the way we kind of had that discussion. So some people have had HRT here, you know, some people might have had discussions, you know, about risk assessment. So some people might have concerns, you know, about risk that they think they have. Can we have another discussion? Risk. So we've talked about the risk of breast cancer. We've said that the type of HRT that you have, but certainly your GP would be wanting to know, oh, is there someone in your family that's had breast cancer? Usually that risk is more important if it's a first-degree relative, if it's breast cancer that was under the age of 50 or around. You know, you would not really be looking at your grandmother who had breast cancer when she was 90. You know, that's not the kind of risk that we're looking at. Then clotting disorders, especially if there's a family history of clotting disorders, because we know that HRT can be associated with having clots. So if you already have underlying issues, either you've had a clot yourself in the past, or there's a family history of a clotting disorder that you might also have, that might have an impact. Then the weight, all the other ones, weight, smoking status, exercise, alcohol, I like to put those there because they're those risks that are just in our normal lifestyle. And when women want to have HRT, all they're thinking about is breast cancer. All they're thinking about is breast cancer, you know, and this risk of breast cancer. And I usually break it down for them to say, without you having breast cancer, HRT, if you're overweight, you have a risk of breast cancer. You're more likely to have breast cancer than the person who is not overweight. If you smoke, you have a higher risk of having breast cancer than the person who is not. I didn't want to make this a very academic discussion today, so I didn't come with slides. But if you look online, there's a particular slide that just says the number of extra cases of breast cancer that you would have from just smoking. The number of extra breast cancer you would have from not exercising. So we're talking about 2.5 hours of exercise a week. It makes a difference. There's extra amount of breast cancers that you would have from having higher levels of alcohol than what is the accepted level. So helping them to break down their risk in this way. But then the good thing about this risk is that they're all modifiable. So if you smoke, you can stop smoking. You know, if you're overweight, you can make attempts to cut down on your weight. If you don't exercise, you can start exercising. And that's where we always have very interesting discussions. Oh, my work is very busy. I'm always walking around, up and down, from 9 to 5. Sorry, that's not the exercise I'm talking about. Or, I walk my dogs 2 times a day. Okay. Does your heart rate go dum, 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 dum? When you're walking the dog? No. That's not the type of exercise I'm talking about. So we're talking about 30 minutes, some kind of, formal exercise. It could be a walk, but then you have to probably go climb a hill, somewhere, and then your heart moves. You know that you've done exercise. That's the one I'm talking about.
It's a bit of a catch-22 because one thing I found was I've been going through, of course, the last 3 months have been on HRT now. That might have been before, but putting on weight, and I've never had struggles with my weight, but I've put on so much weight. And does HRT actually help me lose weight? Or is it just that, because I've just started going to the gym, so I've never really had to do anything like that. So is that just because of my age, or because of the menopause, talking about losing weight, that I found that was a really big problem for me, because it just kept coming on. I've never really eaten too much or anything, but the weight just kept coming on. So.
Yeah, sadly, I don't think that HRT helps to cut down weight, but certainly when you're on HRT and you're feeling a lot better, then you're more, your metabolism improves, and then you can be more active. So in that way, it could, but it would not be something that you'd be recommending to someone to help them lose weight. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the middle age spread, isn't it? We talk about the middle age spread. When you get to about that age, then the weight just starts coming on. For some of us have had the middle age spread even before. We're having a chat that while we're having, was it breakfast or earlier? I said, some questions that I would like to ask God when we get to heaven. Why some people can have the same meal that I'm having, or they are skinny, anything. That's life, isn't it? We just have to deal with it. Yeah, so I just thought, those risks, they're the things to think about. So if you're overweight, you can still have HRT. It doesn't mean that you can't have HRT. But if you are overweight, I would be recommending that you have HRT on your skin, not HRT that you swallow as a tablet, because you're more likely to have clots if you're overweight, even without HRT. So putting you on HRT is giving you extra risk. So then I give you the form of HRT that does not increase the risk of you having thromboembolism. So if you were smoking, it's about discussing the risk with you. So I would say, Mrs. X, Miss X, you want HRT, but you smoke 10 a day, you're likely to get a clot in your chest. Most people would, they would want to stop their smoking, but they say you can still have HRT, but if you do, then you're more likely to. So the other making that decision, probably stopping smoking, but you could still have, that's the thing about HRT. You can still have HRT with some of the risks, but it's about having the right type. But certainly I would not be offering oral HRT for someone who smokes or someone who is overweight.
I'll just make one point from personal experience.
Yes, I love that.
I
because I've been through all this. I think exercise is crucial because I had the same problem on the HRT when I stopped it out of fear because one of my colleagues was diagnosed with breast cancer. I just gave it up overnight and I did a lot of harm to myself because I know it was, that maybe start taking calcium or anything, and I was diagnosed with osteoporosis. And I'm still actually on injections now, but I improved my bone density by exercising, not walking, climbing. I'll tell you, no, it's true. When I went for my second
aerobic exercise.
yeah, no, I was climbing the steps. So I went. You might know Mr. George from Medway Hospital.
Yeah.
He saw. Yeah, he actually saw me and he said, "Well, you don't meet criteria for osteoporosis. You have got osteopenia, which you still have." But he said, "Well, you don't meet the criteria. So what have you been doing?" And I said, "Before I go to work, I climb 140 steps." Up and down, and he said, "Oh, you must have a very big house." I said, "No, the 14 steps, I go 10 times up and 10 times down." He said, "Keep doing." And actually, then I came off HRT, and also the treatment. I was taking that tablet they give you once a week to take Lendronic. And I came off, but then I had other problems and came back. But climbing is the best thing, honestly. Flat walking is okay. I'm still climbing.
Yeah, so she was talking about exercising there. For improving your bone density, you want to do any kind of exercises that involves you lifting your body weight. So, lifting your body weight, improve your bone density. I'm really doing lots of exercises there. No. 3,000 seconds.
We've got another 2,000 to go then, isn't it? It's very interesting because I knew some of the symptoms, but I didn't realize DVT is one of the symptoms or the risk. Because I've got DVT in my family, so now you said they will give you a different form of HRT. But now you get the gels, you get plasters, you get pills. Yeah, so So what would be a DVT? Would that be oral? What's the difference between the ones that's on the skin and what's the one that you take orally? Because I thought hormonal treatment is just your preference that you want to take, but obviously it's not.
The risk should help. So yes, it's a hormonal treatment. We just want to get the hormones into your body. And yes, you can have the tablets, but the difference is when you take a tablet, it goes everywhere. You have to swallow it. It goes into your tummy, gets into your digestive tract, gets into your liver. The effects are a lot more than when you have HRT that you apply onto your skin. And it does not extend. Usually when you apply it to your skin, when you don't put it on the hand, it's usually on the thighs, places close by, where you're getting the effect, yeah. So if there's a risk, if I saw someone who has either had a DVT themselves, or they have a family history of a DVT, or they have a clotting disorder, then you want to give them HRT that reduces the risk of having a clot. And that would be transdermal HRT. You will not be offering them oral HRT.
I think when we're talking about the symptoms, I was asking myself a few questions. Definitely over 50. But other than lack of the periods, I don't think I've experienced anything that would tell me that I'm doing menopause. So am I still expecting hot flashes or what is happening?
Oh yeah, so that's the other extreme. So there's the bit where the women are experiencing lots of symptoms and they need HRT. But then some other people will just go through the menopause and they don't know that anything has happened. Only that they're not having any periods. So yeah, lucky you. That's all I can say. I just have a little take-home message. Yeah, just thought you can find them online. So Menopause HRT, Alternatives to HRT. So I thought the take-home message today should be that HRT is the treatment for unacceptable menopausal symptoms. Unacceptable is relative. What is acceptable to you might not be acceptable to me. So it's you. Be true to yourself. The risk is lower than we previously thought. The benefits will outweigh the risk of use in most women. Discussion and thorough risk assessment with your GP is crucial. So if you're having a problem, speak to your GP about it. Risks vary with the type of preparation and the duration of use. You don't need to suffer. Seek help. Thank you for listening.